Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Nain Shorts. Just playing around with one of my blades, which is a funny thing to say in the Filipino martial arts when playing, especially because this is a live blade. And oftentimes when we do train, as we call it playing, we end up with bruises and cuts. But as you can see, we are back in Physique Magnifique. We're at the basement here, 387 Grand Avenue in South San Francisco. If you're ever in the area, stop on by. Pick up one of our cards, and if we're around, we'll be more than happy to share anything or
slow
spend time
down, Mexican. You're talking too fast.
Start over?
No, just slow down.
I'm a little excited today. I had a great day in class at Island Style Kaju Kempo with GM Bob Gomez, and it actually brought up one of the topics that I've been meaning to talk about on the show, and that's in reference to sparring partners or training partners or just fellow students in your class. Because oftentimes, especially in martial arts, we do pair up and we work on techniques, we work on ideas, we work on concepts, sparring, all these things that are integral to the process of really testing whether or not the student knows their stuff, but more importantly, can they make those techniques work? And the other half of that is the person delivering the strike or feeding. Whatever the art is, whatever focus you may have, it becomes highly important for the person that is throwing a punch, that is throwing a kick, that's giving you an attack, that the attack feels real, that it's coming towards you in a sense of, if it hits, it's going to cause some harm. Because otherwise, then what is the other person really learning from it? And oftentimes I've noticed that, especially the people that are very nice, they don't want to hurt anyone. And even though it's a controlled environment, they throw a punch and it's always off to the side. It veers off from its center. Just because subconsciously or whatever the case may be, they don't want to actually harm the person. But when it comes to training combatively, that becomes detrimental. Because all of a sudden, you're learning to deal with a punch that isn't even there. It's not where it's supposed to be. It's not coming straight at you. The kick isn't going to touch you. And you're just going through the motions. You're not learning or picking up anything. And I think that it becomes a very crucial part of the training. You don't have to be an instructor to take this to heart. You really just want to grow. Because the more they grow beside you, the more you're going to grow as well, because the sharper they get, the sharper you become, and you start feeding off each other. It's the environment then that you create with your fellow students that really elevates everybody around you and not just you. And oftentimes I think we forget that. We're there for ourselves. Definitely we have our own reasons to be in class and why we're learning what we're learning, and that's good to keep your focus on that. But you do your part and you do your technique and you do it as cleanly as you possibly can, and then it's your turn to throw a punch and you do this. You just kind of put it out there lazily. And that doesn't do anything for your training part. But do you necessarily have to be aggressive? Do you necessarily have to go hard whenever you're doing any of these things? Unless you're actually sparring and you're going full contact? No, not necessarily. It's not a matter of aggression, really. It's just a matter of understanding what it is you want them to see. If you want them to see a proper punch, then even if you're going slow, you're still in a stance that you would normally throw a regular punch. Your mechanics still are there, even though you're going slow. You're pivoting, you're throwing your hip into it, you're rotating. Whatever type of punch you're doing, if you're doing a wild haymaker, is it really aimed at the person, or are you just putting the arm there for them to do something with it? All these things become integral because there are many arts that require that momentum, that weight of the person coming towards you for them to actually work. And in a real life situation, they're coming after you for real. They're not going to stop short. They're not going to hold their hand out there and let you do your 17 hit technique. It's not going to happen. They're going to throw punches, they're going to throw punches, they're going to throw punches, they're going to throw kicks, they're going to try to tackle you. And all these things are done with meaning out in the real world. So that has to translate into class. Of course, more controlled, and there's no malice. I hope there's no malice. If you have fellow student that's maliciously hurting you, yeah, something needs to be done about that particular person. But beyond that, there usually isn't anything going on in class where you have to really worry about your safety. Bumps and bruises happen. I got punched in the stomach earlier today, and I thought that was awesome because I'm that kind of martial artist. I'm the one that if they hit me hard enough where I react, and it's a real reaction, and they're able to continue with their technique, to me that is by far the best thing. Even as an uki, just being able to see, wow, that really worked. Because then it makes my brain work on, okay, how do I get that response from the person ukiing for me? How do I make sure that I'm really going into the nitty-gritty of the technique, where it's now, how do I make it work? And that's that pressure test. And you build up to it, of course. You don't start off right from the beginning, but it has to be integral to training at one point or another. And this is why it becomes so important as the training partner to be aware of these things, to be aware of, are you being too nice? Are you holding back too much? Are you giving the proper read when it comes to things? When it comes to training in sticks, we get hit all the time because that's what we're working towards. Eventually there's more control, so now you're moving even faster and you're tapping, you're connecting, you're making sure that what you're swinging at is what you're hitting. And as you get in higher levels, you can do it faster, you can do it stronger, you can do it with more pressure, and it just builds each other up. And I can't stress this enough for anyone who is going to train. Be prepared to eventually get hit. But also, and I think more importantly, be prepared to hit back. Because then you're really pushing your partner, your fellow student, to grow within themselves, to actually evaluate whether or not what they're doing is significant enough to be helpful out there, where there is no control, where there is nobody who's going to stop the fight or is going to stop short from causing you harm. Because ultimately, isn't that what we're training for? And even if you're doing sports contact, you're going to get hit eventually. It's not going to be, oh, I learned all these awesome techniques, no one's ever going to touch me. That's not the case. Anyone who's training in any sort of contact sport will know you're going to get hit eventually. So you have to learn how to take it as well as dish it out. And it's that back and forth. This is no longer an idea about techniques or the art or anything of that sort. It really is just that man sharpens man kind of mentality. The better I do, the better they do. The more I give them, the more they give me. And then that's that back and forth. And that's the kind of environment that GM Bob really pushes in our class, and we try to then do the same in our Filipino martial arts. These young kids, these 12, 13-year-olds, they hit fucking hard. They really do. We use padded sticks when we do some of the more full contact because of their lack of control, but they still generate a lot of force, and they understand that, hey, I need to take care of this and make sure it doesn't come back to harm me. Of course, we're not trying to end the fight in class because there are other things to learn from there, but it's something that little by little gets built up. Little by little it gets until it becomes live sticks. Now we're moving. Now we're really throwing punches. Now we're really throwing elbows. Now we're really trying to drop somebody. And we want to see, how do you respond to that? Do you coil up and just start guarding because, ouch, that hurt? Or have you tempered yourself enough through these practices in your training so then you can take a punch and you can still keep on coming? Because the reality is that not everybody's going to tell you, hey, I want to fight you, and they're going to put their dukes up. Oftentimes you might get ambushed, you might get hit, and in that moment of pain, do you just ball up and then get the crap beat out of you, or worse? Or do you respond right away and take the pain and then move past it? It's not something that you can do without training, and it's not something you can do without developing it further. So as a student, I definitely try my best to make sure that even if I'm going slow, my strikes are meaningful. They're meant to go through your face. They're meant to go through your chest. The kicks are meant to cut through your body as much as possible. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I want my fellow students to feel, okay, if I didn't do what I had to do, that would have been an ending blow, or that would have really caused me harm. And that's the process that some of us forget sometimes. We get lazy. We have other issues going on outside of it, and we're not putting our real focus into it. But it, my opinion, should be present at all times, whether you're going slow, whether you're going fast, whether you're just learning or not. It's something that should be in the back of people's heads, and it should be brought out eventually in class, little by little, sure, but it inevitably needs to get to that point where you are feeding properly, where you are striking for the head, where you are striking to the body, you are doing your kicks and punches and everything else involved with purpose. Because ultimately it's to survive that violent attack when it isn't scripted, when it isn't part of your class, when you don't have the control or the instructor to say, that's a good job, or do that again because it sucked. Where there is no do-overs. And then that's when it really counts. So for those of you who train, for those of you who wish to train, for those of you who are still training, definitely something to consider and look out for, because it becomes very important to your training partner. Sure, you're there to learn for you, but why not build everybody up together? And that's really the type of community that we want to build as martial artists, is the ones where we're building each other up constantly. And maybe that little change in mentality, that little change in ideology when it comes to training and not wanting to harm one another, if we can flip that and make it a little bit more real, just a little bit more impactful, so then we're truly practicing the martial part and not just the art. Okay? So that was really what the biggest issue that I had in my head in reference to that. It's been kind of bugging me because sometimes, again, we forget, and sometimes you don't see it, and you're not always in a position to just flat out tell somebody that, and sometimes you are. Maybe we should be very vocal about it and say, hey, throw that right here, or strike me right here like you mean it. So then we can really get into the groove of doing that. Now, this is one of my favorite blades. And I love playing with this. I don't often get to play with it, but I do love to train with it. It is a live blade. Now, if we're talking live blades, I have one that some of you have not yet bought a raffle ticket for, but you need to. Because a good friend, John Atkinson, made this little beauty. And yes, it is a live blade, and I'm not going to play with it too much because it has little prongs that I don't want to cut myself with. But it is being raffled. The Kali Conversation guys and Nain Shorts are raffling this beautiful blade off. Now, $5 a ticket. Okay, buy as many tickets as you want. Get your friends to buy them, but definitely, please, we are going to raffle it off come September. So you do have a couple of months to go, but definitely keep an eye out for it, because we do want this to go to a wonderful home, and it only costs you $5 to win it. Well, possibly win it. I'm not going to give you the odds because, well, you haven't bought a ticket yet. And until you do, I'm not going to give it to you. So please look out for that. A lot of work did go into it, and it's definitely worth a hell of a lot more than $5. John Atkinson did a wonderful job. It's one of two pieces, one of which was taken by a certain someone whose name I shall not name right now because they're looking at me funny. But definitely look out for that and get yourself a ticket. You can do Venmo, you can contact me and do Zelle. I mean, we can figure out a way. I'll write your name and make sure that when the ticket gets pulled, it's your name if you pay extra, but you know, we'll talk about that off camera. So definitely buy a ticket, tell your friends, tell anyone else that would love one of these fantasy blades. You know it's Star Trek. If you don't know that, shame on you. Shame on you. And you should watch some episodes and then maybe get a feel for what the blade is really about. But thank you very much for joining me on another one of Nain Shorts. I hope it was entertaining. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share with your friends, and definitely this is one that I feel should be shared with a lot of your students because it is something that I'm passionate about. Ever since starting with Rico and doing some of the rape prevention classes with him, a big part of our class was always, sure, get the technique to work, but then get the technique to work while you're being startled. And that was a big part of it. And it's not the most comfortable thing to do in that particular setting, but I took it to heart because once you get that shock and that adrenaline rush, everything goes out the window. All the wonderful techniques, all the wonderful movements that you've been doing and practicing so far, they disappear. And if we don't practice how to deal with that rush of adrenaline, that heightened sense, all the techniques in the world are going to be useless to us. So yes, I do believe that it is a very important part of our training process to be able to reach that point and then maintain our control as we reach it. And that requires a good training partner to be able to push you there, a good student to get you to that point where you are responding under duress. So it's definitely an important aspect of training. Definitely buy a ticket for this blade, and I'll see you on the next one. As usual, 3, 2, 1, cut!